Hi, so I was reading Fire and Blood again and there was one thought that kept continuously crossing my mind repeatedly. OMG, King Jaehaerys is the best ruler of Westeros to ever exist. Ever. This dude is incredible, and in this video I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to put this book down because it's very heavy. And I hope you enjoy. Give it a thumbs up if you do. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started. This video will be titled Why King Jaehaerys is the Best. However, let's remember, this is just why I think Jaehaerys is the best. Although there are facts from the Targaryen history set out in Fire and Blood in this video, ultimately it's based on opinion. And the beauty of us all being different people is that we can all have different opinions and we don't need to be salty about it. So if you do have a different opinion to me, or if you agree with me, I would love for you to leave a comment and let me know your thoughts and opinions on King Jaehaerys or any other rulers of Westeros. I will also leave timestamps in the description box for the points that I'm going to make, so if you want to skip ahead to a point that you're interested in, please feel free to do so. Let's introduce this video with who is King Jaehaerys I? The first of his name, also known as Jaehaerys the Conciliator, the old king, the wise king, just a great king, or as I like to call him, the best king ever. I'm very passionate about him, if you couldn't tell. He was the son of King Alysanne Targaryen. He was not actually the eldest son, however his elder brothers had passed away, which meant that he was the heir. And he was the grandson of Aegon the Conqueror, a very important man in Westeros history. However, following Jaehaerys' father's death, the throne was usurped by his half-brother, Maegor the Cruel. Maegor the Cruel, oh, I could do a whole nother video about him, and I might. So he took the throne ahead of Aenys's children, who were the rightful heirs. There was this big feud between young Jaehaerys and Maegor the Cruel around who was in line for the Iron Throne, and eventually the houses all declared that Jaehaerys was the rightful heir to the throne. And it seems like the Iron Throne agreed with that decision because Maegor was actually found dead upon the Iron Throne. Did somebody kill him, or did the Iron Throne kill him? Who knows, but I like to think that the Iron Throne rejected him. King Jaehaerys I ruled from the ages of 14 to 69, although I know that until I think it's like the 16th name day, they can't officially rule. So he sat on the Iron Throne for 55 years. That's a long old time. And especially in that time, that was more than people's lifespan. People didn't live very long in those days. So that's King Jaehaerys I in a nutshell regarding how he got onto the Iron Throne. Let's talk about why he is the best ruler of Westeros ever. Firstly, he resolved the mess from all the previous rulers before him, and they created a big mess. He is known as Jaehaerys the Conciliator because he put an end to an 11-year uprising by the Faith of the Seven, which had been fought by Maegor the Cruel as well. Let me read out the description of conciliator for you. A person who acts as a mediator between two disputing people or groups. And ain't that the truth? So first of all, he made peace with the Faith of the Seven and put an end to conflict here. He swore for the Iron Throne to always defend and protect the Faith, and in turn, the Faith agreed to give up its condemnation of House Targaryen's sibling love. Obviously, it is known that House Targaryen likes to wed brother to sister, niece to uncle, cousin to cousin. The Faith were not very happy with that. It makes sense. But King Jaehaerys managed to put an end to the conflict here, put an agreement forth with the Faith, and in turn they agreed that they would let the Targaryens continue those practices and marry their own family members off to other family members. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't support that. I'm aware that it is the practice of House Targaryen. It's not a new thing, it's something that they've always done. So I don't support that, but I do support how King Jaehaerys put an end to the conflict with the Faith. So he was the conciliator. He was also the first king to establish a unified system of laws across the entire realm. How does somebody do that? Obviously, he had a great council behind him to help him put these laws into practice. There's a quote that I really like that is on page 123 in Fire and Blood. Within a moon's turn of being crowned, Grand Maester Benefer wrote, King Jaehaerys had reconciled the Iron Throne to the Faith and put an end to the bloodshed that had troubled the reigns of his uncle and father. Within a moon's turn! How fast can you get? This boy was determined. The next point for why King Jaehaerys was the best ruler in Westeros is because he also had a great queen, which can't be said for some of the others. Cough Alysanne cough. So we've got King Jaehaerys I and Queen Alysanne, who were both just brilliant. Is it Alysanne, Alysanne, whatever word comes out my mouth. And they were both beloved by all. People adored Queen Alysanne. She was a great advocate to women as well, so she was the first to hold women-specific courts, listening to what they want, trying to put laws forward for women as well and have fairer treatment of women. And it wasn't just women of noble birth, she also held women's courts for women not of noble birth, like those in brothels for example, and was listening to what they would desire. Feminism at its peak. Alysanne also had great influence as well. In page 323 of Fire and Blood, Alysanne was stubborn and persistent, and she had a way of bringing the king around to her own point of view, no matter how far apart they had been at the start. Which meant that King Jaehaerys was always listening to her point of view, and she was a very active council member. He wouldn't just listen to his hand or the council of lords from all the different houses, he would listen to his good queen as well. Good Queen Alysanne had loved her subjects, lords and commons alike. She had loved her women's courts, listening, learning and doing what she could do to make the realm a kinder place. She had seen more of the Seven Kingdoms than any queen before or since, slept in 100 castles, charmed 100 lords and made 100 marriages. She had loved music, had loved to dance, had loved to read, and oh how she had loved to fly. These two as a pairing just seem like incredible rulers jointly. I mean, Jaehaerys would have been great on his own, but with Queen Alysanne at his side, how can you fault it? King Jaehaerys also had one of the best hands in history as well. We've got good old Septon Barth, who played a role in all of Jaehaerys' great works for the 4 decades. He was described as the wisest man to ever serve as Hand of the King. When you've got a great King Jaehaerys with a brilliant Queen Alysanne and a fantastic hand Septon Barth, they are obviously going to do great things for the realm. My next point is that King Jaehaerys also resolved the realm's finances. Maegor the Cruel's rule, that's hard to say. Maegor's rule had left the Seven Kingdoms near bankruptcy, which led in an increase of resentment towards the Iron Throne by the small folk. I'm pretty sure around that time we also had Lord Celtigar's taxes, which added to the problem as well because everything was increased. Cost of living crisis back in those days. The UK can relate. So Jaehaerys turned to a merchant named Jaehaerys, I believe it's pronounced, who was responsible for finding a new source of income for the Iron Throne. And what he did is, instead of setting tolls and taxes on the small folk, he instead taxed luxury silks, tapestries, luxurious items. And later on there was also a settlement negotiated by Septon Barth with the Sea Lord of Bravos, which led to the Iron Bank cancelling any debts that were currently outstanding and owed by the Seven Kingdoms. This meant that the crown's finances were restored, and Jaehaerys then could spend more work and money on rebuilding King's Landing's transport routes and turning it into a much better place from the mess it had become, so they were able to budget and use their finances more wisely. King Jaehaerys was a brave and loyal king. He wasn't as weak as people initially thought he might be. On page 282 of this big boy book, so wroth was his grace at what he saw that Sir Joffrey Doggett would say afterward, "When I looked upon his face, for a moment it was as if I were looking at his uncle," referring to Maegor the Cruel. But obviously he was nowhere near as bad as his uncle. And this is after the Master of Coin, Lord Jaehaerys, has been murdered in the street. And obviously there was that connection between Jaehaerys and Jaehaerys because they had restored the crown's finances together, and then Jaehaerys is murdered. And that really showed that Jaehaerys is not a weak king. Just because he's kind does not mean he's weak. We also have the example of the Third Dornish War, or Lord Roger's War, where Jaehaerys showed that he was a really brave and loyal king. So Lord Roger Baratheon's brother had teamed up with somebody called the Vulture King, and they were threatening Lord Roger. So Lord Roger asked King Jaehaerys if he could take leave so that he could end the threat set by his brother. Jaehaerys replied to him saying that Lord Roger does not only have his leave, but his sword too. Jaehaerys got himself involved in the fight, he fought for Lord Roger Baratheon, and Lord Roger's brother, who was initiating the fight, was called Boris Baratheon. and Jaehaerys went face to face with Boris because he didn't want Lord Roger to become a kinslayer by having to kill his own brother, so Jaehaerys killed Boris for him. And following the conflict, King Jaehaerys' actions and his input were then widely known throughout the Seven Kingdoms, and all the lords of the realm began to respect their king more, and any doubts about his bravery were removed from that point forwards. We also have the Fourth Dornish War, where Jaehaerys and his sons descended onto that fight with their dragons, and therefore Dragonflame destroyed the entire Dornish fleet. A quote that I love in reference to this war is on page 313. Even Aegon the Conqueror had never won a war without losing a man. Jaehaerys didn't lose a single man in this war. King Jaehaerys is also a forgiving king. So not only did he restore King's Landing, built roads, rebuilt the city and its transport links, restored the crown's finances, and reduced taxes on the small folk, but he also reconciled with the lords who fought alongside Maegor the Cruel. There was also a disgustingly awful man named Septon Moon, and his point of views were massively against the Targaryens. He even said at one point something along the lines of, Westeros will not be clean again until all the Targaryens had been slain or driven back into the sea. So this man was massively against Targaryens. King Jaehaerys also forgave and reconciled with the men who rode alongside Septon Moon. He obviously reconciled with the Faith, like we mentioned previously, and at one point Lord Roger Baratheon actually tried to remove Jaehaerys from the throne and put Arya on the throne instead, and Jaehaerys forgave him. So all of these people that had done wrong by King Jaehaerys, he actually showed forgiveness. Although it wasn't naivety or stupidity, he was still very much so aware that there were traitors and treason all over the place. But he just wanted peace, ultimately. He also spent much of his reign travelling to all the different houses and all the different lords, trying to connect with the realm. And in doing so, he gained a lot of respect and loyalty from them because he put that effort in to meet with them and connect with them. And then my final point, King Jaehaerys I Targaryen was the most peaceful king, and that was much needed after the mess of the rulers before him. I'm looking at you, Maegor the Cruel. We've got another quote that I like. Page 339. The seeds of war are oft planted during times of peace. So has it been in Westeros. The bloody struggle for the Iron Throne, known as the Dance of Dragons, had its roots half a century earlier, during the longest and most peaceful reign that any of the Conqueror's descendants had ever enjoyed, that of Jaehaerys I Targaryen, the Conciliator. Let me just emphasise a bit. The longest and most peaceful reign. And the seeds of war that initiated the Dance of the Dragons, they weren't intentional by King Jaehaerys. You can't blame him for that. Those seeds are planted by illegitimate births, let's be honest. Those seeds are planted by Targaryens spreading their seeds too much. So even though everything that happened after King Jaehaerys' rule was absolutely diabolical, it wasn't his fault. It wasn't really anything to do with him. The seeds were just planted during his reign, but ultimately his reign was the longest and the most peaceful. He also seemed to be just generally a great guy. He was very loyal and very faithful to his wife, which you didn't really see in those days, and to be honest, you still don't see these days. Page 331. His Grace would oft find himself seated next to some maid or a handsome widow at feasts, or riding beside them when hawking or hunting, but he took no notice of any of them. At Bandalon, when Lord Blackbar's youngest daughter was so bold as to seat herself in his lap and attempt to feed him a grape, he brushed her hand aside and said, "Forgive me, but I have a queen, and no taste for paramours." I just love this guy. So based on all of that, you cannot deny that King Jaehaerys I Targaryen, Jaehaerys the Conciliator, the Old King, was a great ruler, if not the best ruler in all of Westeros, and I think he is. Based on all of those points, I think there is a good argument there to declare him as being the best and most peaceful, but most loyal and brave ruler in all of Westeros. Even things like sorting out the finances, reducing the tax on the small folks, rebuilding King's Landing and the transport links. He built roads. They didn't have roads prior to that. Sorry, I feel like I'm getting very passionate. I think I need to chill. So those are my points on why I think King Jaehaerys is the best ruler of Westeros ever. But what do you think? I am even more excited to know your opinion because I know my own opinion. I'd love to know what other people's are. Leave me a comment and let me know if you agree If you think that somebody else is the best ruler of Westeros, let me know what your thoughts and opinions are so that we can keep this conversation going, because I love talking about this stuff, even if I'm wrong. And if you've got any feedback on this video, then that is always greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up to let me know that you did. And if you like my content and you want to see more from me, then please subscribe, because it's free and it means that you can see my videos easier. Thank you so much for watching this video and for listening to me ramble on about King Jaehaerys. I really appreciate you being here as always. I will see you next time, or rather you'll see me, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye for now.